E mihi anō ki a tātou katoa, I tae mai whakaronga ngā kōrero. Kia ora everybody, back again regarding the 1835 and the 1840 document and any other document that our tupuna has left behind. There are many documents that they've left behind. Here up in the north, we've just completed a tribunal process. If I can, I just want to begin because there is a lot of reading. I think 19 tons of A4 pieces of paper stored in the Paparahi o Taraki 1040 tribunal process for Ngāpuhi. I just wanted to put this perspective out there as to the reason why the taumata kaumātua Ngāpuhi Nūtonu and Te Wakaminenga o ngā hapu Ngāpuhi engaged with the Waitangi Tribunal, okay? And it wasn't to go into any negotiations. It wasn't to do a 1% settlement of land that was acquired by the government. It was specifically for the purpose of wānanga, and the information that they left behind was for the next generation. They had no intentions going into negotiations or going into any type of settlement. And those of you who have been outside of Ngāpuhi, who have been following that process and that system, you know, the contact with the southern tribes was limited. We weren't involved in any of your deliberations, but we watched closely what happened. And so we're here now attempting to share Paparahi o Taraki 1040. If you want to go on to the Waitangi Tribunal site, there are audio recordings. I'm not sure if they're available to everybody of those tribunal hearings, but more importantly, the video recordings that we have in regards to the discussions and the many hui, the judicial conferences and the many tai whenua. There were many tai whenua hui that were held each week, and there were many discussions within hapu. There were many hui on marae. If I can, the Northern Tribe Paparahi o Taraki tribunal process was well over a decade. As you may know, there was a stage 1 and a stage 2 before stage 2 began. Stage 1 was called the initial hearings, where Ngāpuhi took the opportunity, or those within the Paparahi o Taraki 1040 process took the opportunity to have discussions or leave evidence behind regarding He Whakaputanga and Te Tiriti o Waitangi. The Māori text, if I can say it like that, not the English text. So it was an untold story. I'm very proud and pleased of our Ngāpuhi elders that went that way to leave that information behind. There were, at the beginning of the tribunal process, there were an agreed discussion that was had by the elders. They left 4 articles behind as to how that process would begin. The tribunal, the judge at that time, and I won't name him, held up a blank piece of paper and said, Ngāpuhi, you write the rules. This is your hearing. You've waited over 160 years for this. You write the rules. So I'd like to just quickly disclose those rules, if I can, for clarification or evidence that the tribe didn't go into this process for hearings. Although I have heard that you enter this process, I want to assure you that Ngāpuhi did not do that. So the first article within the tribunal process was Riro Whenua tu Hoki Whenua Mai. Now, that was in support of the Muri Whenua who began this whole Waitangi tribunal process, which was land taken, land must be returned. That's our position. And the second article that was delivered to the tribunal was He Whakaputanga me Te Tiriti will be first off the taxi rank, and that will be a tribunal hearing. Determine the breaches of, which was stage 2, Te Tiriti o Waitangi. The third article was regarding the tribunal, and what Ngāpuhi wanted was an independent tribunal to record the events that took place. There was an independent tribunal that sat during that alongside the Waitangi tribunal. And what came from the report that came from that was a document called Ngāpuhi Speaks. You can Google that document, you can acquire that document. I would encourage everybody to read that document. The fourth article, which is very, very important, which validates we're not here to go into negotiations or go into any of those deliberations with the government here, was simply the next generation. So if we look at our āhua and the way that our tupuna thought, that was half the job done. Okay, the next generation. Now, there's a brief discussion about the next generation and what does that mean for us and some of the younger people here in the Ngāpuhi territory regarding this tribunal process, and more to the point, the evidence that was left behind was that we would complete that circle by going in return. So how do we find the next generation? After long discussions about mandates and discussions about elections to elect the next generation, it became very clear that if we go into our taha Māori world, we'll find that the next generation arrives when the last generation has gone. And so we're here, we're the next generation. And so those of us in that taha Māori world mindset realize that we are the next generation. So in saying that, now that that's been acknowledged, we go back to Article 3, and Article 3 being the independent tribunal report, which was Ngāpuhi Speaks. It's been suggested that we go into that report and read all the evidence that was submitted by our tupuna, and now they are tupuna, that was submitted, that's referenced in Ngāpuhi Speaks, to acquire the tons and tons of A4 pieces of paper that give us a good, true perspective of the He Whakaputanga and Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and I'll say again the Māori text, and acquire the tools that were left behind in the Article 2 of the tribunal process, which was He Whakaputanga and Te Tiriti. In there, after reading and learning all of that information, we're going to conclude with Riro Whenua Atu Hoki Whenua Mai. The tools are in there. The tools are in He Whakaputanga and Te Tiriti, regardless of what's being portrayed, what's being perceived. I do want to indicate that the stories that are being told outside of this Paparahi o Taraki tribunal process are Western world knowledge from their research machine. How the government and how successive governments portrayed that they eliminated the sovereignty of the 1840 document, and they superseded the 1835 document. From my perspective of sitting in meetings with all the elders of the past, concluding with why did they say what they said, if that was in fact true, what the government have said. So we find ourselves in a unique situation where the other tribes that settle on the English text have a clear opportunity to revisit, because we're talking about the Māori text with Ngāpuhi, if your tupuna signed the Te Tiriti o Waitangi. I just want to mention one small note that the Te Wakaminenga was mentioned 4 times in the Te Tiriti o Waitangi. That's who sat in chambers, I guess, that and negotiated that document. So what I'm wanting to do, because of all of that reading, there's again, there's an analytical thinker that's required to read the information that was left behind. And what I'm going to portray here in this little explanation is how we come about to read to get the true understanding of all of that information that was left behind, but more to the point when we get to the document and read it as to what the document is actually saying. So what I want to do, and again, I'm not here to challenge anyone's intelligence, but what I am going to do is challenge your intelligence in how you perceive a simple sentence and what in fact it says. But what I'd like to do is I'm going to write a simple sentence on the board here, and I'm going to go through it and see how we can make the mistakes that we make very, very easily using English words, if I can say it like that, because it's the English words that have that have done the damage in their attempt to, I'm going to say, interpret what you cannot interpret te reo into English. Although it's been said you can, I'm going to say to you that you can't. You can give an explanation of the kupu within He Waka Putanga, but in another discussion, we'll talk about the different dialects that the Te Tiriti is written in and the dialect that He Waka Putanga is written in. So you have to read the documents in the specific dialect that they are written in. And we know that there are many, many different dialects that exist here in Aotearoa between the tribes, the southern tribes and the northern tribes, and lots of different phrases that are used are totally different, but they give the same explanation in the end. So the sentence I would like to write up here is, there is a bright star in the sky. I'm using English purposely because it's the language that's done the damage. Okay, even the word sovereignty. If we go to Article 2 of He Waka Putanga, there is a new kupu in there, but it's still under that same dialect as the document is written in. For an example, ko te kingitana, ko te mana ki te whenua. So the kingitana is the explanation of sovereignty. Okay, it's not tino rangatira in Article 1, ko mātou ko ngā tino rangatira. Sovereignty does not come under or have an explanation to do with tino rangatiratanga. Our tupuna left it in Article 2, the explanation of sovereignty, ko te kingitana, ko te mana I te whenua. So you can do your own explanation of that, but the kupu kingitana was because of the research that our tupuna did when they travelled overseas. They saw the governing structure of Britain. They saw there was a king, and they realised very quickly that sovereignty was a type of status that was used for governance. So kingitana was used as an explanation of the word sovereignty, not the word tino rangatiratanga. So we're still getting caught up today, and we're given the wrong information in assuming that tino rangatiratanga has a relevance or reference to sovereign or sovereignty. And in fact, it doesn't. It has no reference at all. But we'll get into those. These are the simple mistakes that you can make because of our lack of knowledge of te reo Māori, or more to the point, what the document is actually saying. So in this sentence here, there is a bright star in the sky. So what some of us have the ability, let's just say there's two people. So I'm going to pull this word here, bright. So if we read there is a bright star in the sky, we could look at that as light, or we could look at it as clever. It's the same word, but it has two totally different meanings in the English language. And that's what we've done with the kupu tino rangatiratanga. We've given it the wrong meaning. In this context here, when we read the whole sentence, there are also emotions that expose when you read here. There are 4 specific emotions that you can't control, but only the observer who knows and teaches this method of reading, which in our taha Māori world can identify that there's a word there you don't understand. And the first emotion, and they arrive very, very quickly. If you're reading this sentence and you're given the understanding that that word means clever, you'll expose an emotion of exhausted or tired. You'll start to yawn unconsciously, and you won't know you're doing that. And as you continue reading through the sentence, there are other emotions that will arrive that will support that you didn't understand, or you've given a particular word a wrong meaning. So again, it's really important that you read the document with someone that can identify those emotions that you're exposing to reading the 1835 or the 1840 or any document that your tupuna left behind, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to capture the emotion of the author when their document was written, which isn't actually easy to do if we're stuck in the contemporary world. So the first emotion you expose is tired. And this happens to our children in school. So it used to happen in my day at intermediate school and primary school, where you would get it wrong, you'd get the strap. And the reason why you would get the strap or get disciplined because you got it wrong, one, because you're a Māori. But anyway, because the next three emotions are what expose the validation for the teacher to strap you. You get angry. You conclude with getting angry. You actually get the book and you throw it across the room and you're sent in the corner. These aren't emotions of a normal person. It's an emotion of a person that's been taught the wrong way to learn and the wrong way to read. So what happens now is that person observing you and observing those emotions. Firstly, you get tired, then you get frustrated, and then you're annoyed and you don't want to be there. And then you're told to continue reading, even though you haven't. So the whole story gets misunderstood because your perspective of bright is clever. It's nothing to do with the light. Right? So you go back and you read the story again, you read the sentence again. And as you go through the sentence again, you can't actually find where the word is that you don't understand, but you read it again. And the moment you feel tired, when you start reading, you're feeling very clever because you know the meaning of that word. You know the meaning of that word. You know the meaning of that word. As soon as you begin saying that word, the emotion of tired appears. It appears very, very quickly. And as you go through, you start to feel frustrated. And then you start to feel depressed or disappointed. And then when you get to the word the, you're angry and you don't want to be here anymore. So that's that exposure of those emotions that you're exposing are to identify the word, not to get you sent to the principal office to get a strap. And then you've lost the whole education of reading that story with the rest of the class. So you turn up the next week and you've missed what the class went through. So there's another consequence of that this method of, or I'll call it that mainstream education system and what it's done to our people. So when you get to that point and then you start to read it again and you feel it coming on, pull the word out. And because it's an English word, you go to a dictionary. Sounds like dictionary. You go to a dictionary and you find the whatever, because in the dictionary and you're looking up the word bright, it will have many, many different meanings in there. It'll even have what's called an idiom. An idiom is when a word's being used and it has no relevance to the sentence that it's in. It's just there to fill a space. That's my explanation. That's my explanation of what an idiom is. So we get to a point in time where we go to the dictionary, we find the word, we find the appropriate meaning, and then we go back to the sentence and we read it again. All right? You have to read it again. And you once you've got the understanding of that word that fits the sentence in the context that it's written in, okay, you become very clever, or you feel very, very secure in reading that whole sentence and getting the understanding of it. I know this is a very, very simple sentence that's being used in this explanation, but if I was to write up the first line of He Wakaputanga, we could be here for many, many hours because none of us even understand the kupu, the first two kupu on the document of Komato. And that is not good. That's not good for our our future generations, if we don't understand it, they're going to go to a dictionary, a Western world dictionary, to find out what a Māori kupu says. So in saying that, I'm very, very pleased to be able to give this opportunity to share this with you. And it's based on all of the questions that I'm receiving from people, right throughout the country and in some other places offshore, about I'm interpreting, how do we get to the document? What do we need to do to understand the document? Nobody said it was going to be easy. In learning, the authors of the two documents had the benefit of tupuna or ancestors that shared the knowledge going right back to Te Kore, right back to the whakahau from the ultimate one, calling Ranginui and Papatuanuku. So that was the mindset that they had when they authored the document. Unfortunately, we don't have that pleasure of having all of that knowledge to be able to read what they left behind. And that's why I'm saying the first line of He Wakaputanga, or the first two kupu. Have a huge understanding from that past, okay, or from that time, going right back to the request for Ranginui and Papatuanuku to be called through the koho. In saying that, so it's not difficult to do. It's not difficult at all to do if we take the opportunity to do that. So in saying that, thank you all again. Kia ora tātou.